The Crow is a dark fantasy released in 1994, directed by Alex Proyas.
Yeah, it stars Brandon Lee as Eric Draven, who's like a musician who lives with his fiancée. And on Devil's Night, which is the night before Halloween, some thugs come in and attack them and kill them both. 1 year later, Eric is resurrected by a crow, hence the title. So and then the story is revenge on these thugs and the guy that controls them, and that's it basically. And it's a story of where we see flashbacks of him and his fiancée Shelley, in happier times. And there's a voiceover from a girl that they look after, who is the daughter of another character in the film, but she's a bit of a sort of absentee mother who'd rather sort of shoot more, or it's morphine, I think, isn't it? Yeah, shoot morphine or whatever's available with one of these thugs, than look after her daughter. And there's a cop also who's there on the night of the murders and who kind of takes Sarah, the little girl, under his wing. He's played by Ernie Hudson, obviously of Ghostbusters fame and other things. Yeah, so probably the film's most famous for the death of Brandon Lee, who was accidentally shot on set and unfortunately died in hospital a few hours later. Yeah, so obviously cast a bit of a shadow over the film on its release.
Unfortunately, I think that's what this film's famous for. I don't think it should be. Obviously Brandon Lee, son of the famous Bruce Lee, who hadn't had not much of a career before he did this one.
No, he was early on. He hadn't made many films. Probably the most famous were Rapid Fire and Showdown in Little Tokyo.
But then he comes along and he does this. And what's interesting about this, I think he really shows some good acting skills off. I think his acting in this, his performance in this is really, really good. And unfortunately, I think this film has been overshadowed by his untimely death on set, and where it should possibly be remembered for other things. I'm sure there are fans of the film that remember it for the film that it is. Yeah. But obviously, if you go online, there's all the conspiracy theories and all the myths and all the stuff that was surrounded his death and everything. But in hindsight, it's just it's very sad, obviously, that he died. Because it's interesting. It would have been interesting to see where what he would have done after this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because as we said, the previous two films he did had a lot of martial arts content in them. But this, The Crow, has stunts and action scenes and things, but not really. It wasn't really a martial arts film.
No,
at all, really. So he was moving in a different direction with it, and it would have been interesting to see what else he did. We talked about River Phoenix a few weeks ago. A similar sort of situation where. There was so much potential there for other, great roles that, we obviously never came to be.
Yeah, indeed. But so we should also note that this film, so we did Dark City about a month ago now, which is also directed by Alex Proyas, and we were thinking about doing this one then, but for some reason we did Dark City. No. But this film is, back then, what was it, May-ish? It was about 25, so 25 years old, this film, so that's why we've decided to do it today or tonight. And this one is one that we both really enjoyed as teenagers. This came out so it was 94. We were both kind of mid-teens and into kind of alternative music and lifestyles, and I think this is one of those films that's stuck with us. It appealed to our kind of sensibilities at that point. Our teen angst, indeed. Yeah, and it's kind of full of, it's full of. He's got the long hair and the black leather and. Won't go there again, and then of course you got the rock music all over the soundtrack. This has got a great soundtrack. I used to listen to a lot of these. It was kind of a way of finding music back then, because we didn't have the internet, and it was a way of you discover new bands. Some of the bands I knew already. So of course this soundtrack's got people like there's Rage Against the Machine on there, Henry Rollins, or the Rollins band are on there, Pantera on there.
Stone Temple Pilots,
Nine Inch Nails, Stabbing Westward, My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, they're on there as well, and The Cure. And The Cure. In fact, the main song of the piece is called "Burn" by The Cure, which is a really good song, and it really kind of fits with the whole theme of the film, I think. It does also have a score by Graham Revell, who was he was a New Zealand musician. He was in back in the 80s, 90s in this industrial noise outfit called SPK. Have you heard of?
No.
You should check them out.
I shall.
You might like them. You might not. It's quite loud.
Okay.
Anyway. And he's done lots of soundtracks over the years. He did the Riddick series and
Tomb Raider, the original one with Angelina Jolie, and Strange Days, which we...
Strange Days, yeah. Strange Days is actually an interesting one because this is feels quite like this film a lot. We obviously covered Strange Days again a few weeks ago.
Yep.
And apart from it being, it's quite a dark... This film's a very dark film. That film's all set at night as well, so that's very dark. But of course, there's the crossover with Michael Wincott as well.
Yeah.
Michael Wincott in this plays what's the character's name?
Top Dollar.
So he's like the big bad boss
of
all the kind of the henchmen involved in this film, and he plays quite a similar role in this as he did in Strange Days as well, and right down to the fact that he kind of owns a club.
And lives above the
club, and there's all these bands playing. Hence, you get these bands on the soundtrack, as he did a lot of this in those days.
Yep.
Definitely similarities between, and also Dark City. That was also Alex Proyas that we did. I mean, that film's very, very dark. I mean, they're quite kind of gothic, noirish. Film, modern day fantasy thrillers. These films. And I think you can kind of see connections within all of them. And I find that in the 90s quite a dark time when it comes to cinema.
Well, I think obviously Tim Burton's Batman that came out in '89, it was a huge hit. But, again, a very dark, gothic film. After it did so well, obviously there'd been a few years where there wasn't really any comic book movies because, I think people had just given up on them after Superman 4. And suddenly studios were like, wow, we can actually make money out of this, and try to snap up as many comic book properties as cheaply as possible that they could, which resulted in some poor films, but also some great ones like The Crow, and even stuff like Darkman, which was Sam Raimi's first attempt at a comic book movie, but it wasn't actually based on a comic book.
Right.
It was just his version of a comic book movie. Obviously, he went on to do Spider-Man, but the original comic book was written by a guy named James O'Barr. The Crow. I mean, he was actually born out of his own grief with when he lost his fiancée to who was run over by a drunk driver. So that's why it's quite dark and miserable. And and I think the film follows it reasonably closely. There are elements in there that they didn't either have time for, the budget for. They left out. Honestly, when Brandon Lee did die, they had to change things slightly, even though he had about 3 days left to film. There wasn't a lot, but enough that they had to change the script slightly. And then, obviously, it was quite an early use of putting somebody's face on someone else's body, which they did for certain elements. Other things, they took footage and just cut him out and put him on a different background. There was lots of double stuff. I mean, quite near the start of the film, which is the section they didn't get to film with him. You can see that he's filmed from behind, his head's in shadow, and things like that. So you can tell that it's a lot of the time it's not actually Brandon Lee that you're watching. But you wouldn't, unless you knew that. It's all very well done. You wouldn't without knowing that you probably wouldn't realise that that's the case. I mean, obviously that's the case. A lot of films there's body doubles used for all sorts of reasons, and stuntmen and things like that. And but for this, obviously, slightly more than they would have been originally. Yeah,
and I think it works. I mean, the film itself, the look of the film is very stylised. I think it has possibly been kind of people put it down as being a bit more stylish over substance.
A little bit,
but, I think the style works really well. I mean, I'm not personally a huge comic book fan or superhero fan, and I think although this definitely obviously it was a comic book, so it has links to that world. I've also always personally found it more it's a bit more like a vampire film. Obviously he is a character that rises from the dead and then kind of gets his revenge on people. So there's kind of links to vampire, and that's also something else that was going on in the 90s. There were lots of vampire movies around. Obviously at the end of the 80s you had The Lost Boys and Near Dark, and then in the 90s you had Blade and
Bram Stoker's
Dracula, John Carpenter's vampires. This is long before the days of Twilight. This is real vampire territory. None of that daylight stuff. So I think I really like this film. I think it's dark and it's gritty and it's got some really great set pieces going on, some great lines, and then you've got these really great bad guys in there. I think all the bad guys in the film are actors that have been, they've performed bad guys in other films. They're quite used to it, and they're all quite nasty in this film. And they've all got kind of these strange pseudonyms, haven't they? So these people like you've got Fun Boy, played by Michael Massey. And then you've got Skank, played by Angel David.
And T-Bird, played by David Patrick Kelly.
David Patrick Kelly, yes, who of course famously, well, he's been in loads of films, but I always remembered him from Commando. You know, he's the one that Arnie drops over the side of the hill. Well, you got Tony Todd in there as well.
Yeah,
Tony
he's like
Todd
sort of the enforcer for Michael Wincott's character, isn't he? Like sort of second in command. And I think they sort of have a competition of who out of him and Michael Wincott, who's got the graveliest voice.
Yes, indeed. Because, of course, Tony Todd, famous for Candyman and Final Destination, films like that. And he's always a great on-screen presence as well. So, I think this film's got... I think it's one of those films that, had it not been for this cast, it may not have worked. But you could probably say that with any film, I suppose. But I just think everyone in this works really well together. Yeah. Ernie Hudson's great. He brings a kind of nice... kind of comedy, not comedy, but he brings some humour to the film.
He's not, he's not that surprised when he sees, when he realises who Eric is. He's not particularly surprised to see him as the other.
No, he's not. It's a bit odd, and then he draws over the makeup on the
Once he realises who it is, and then he appears in his apartment, he's like, oh, hi. Even though it's a dead man is in front of him.
Yeah. We should also mention there's the actress Anna Levine, and she plays the Sarah's mother. What's the character's name? Is it not?
Darla.
Darla, that's correct. And she again, similar to the guys playing all the bad guys, she's quite famous for playing, hookers and drug addicts. She was in... She was on Unforgiven. She played a prostitute in Unforgiven. She was in True Romance. She plays I think she's the prostitute who meets Christian Slater in the bar at the beginning. She was in a film called Drunks, where she plays a drunk, obviously.
I think she's in Bad Boys as well.
I think she's in Bad Boys, and she's also in a really strong kind of film no one's really heard of called Fiona, where she also plays like a street hustler, prostitute type, which is a really good film worth seeking out. So yeah, I think the film's got a really, really great cast.
And of course, Sarah as well, the young girl who also narrates as well over the film.
She does.
Yeah, she was played by Rochelle Davis, who hasn't really done much else, only a couple of other credits. So not sure why, but there you go.
Some young actors, they probably decide they don't want to maybe do that, or the success doesn't find them in that way.
No.
And but I think she's perfectly good in this film. She does it really well. She's kind of because you say she narrates the film, she's kind of holding it together, and I think she does a really, really, really good role in it. I mean, I like this film because I think there's a nice character story. It's a nice driven story through there, and it's about loss, and it's about revenge, and it's things that obviously crop up in cinema a lot. And I think in this film it works really well, and it's got some, like I said before, it's got some great set pieces. Do you have a favourite? Do you have a favourite scene in this film?
You had to spring that on me, didn't you?
I did.
I think maybe the shootout when they're having a meeting.
Oh yeah, it's particularly good.
Actually on the DVD there's extended scenes and deleted scenes. And that the original cut of that was even longer and it's actually a bit more violent.
Right.
So I guess maybe they cut. I think maybe they cut some of the violence because of Brandon Lee's death. Maybe it was some of it maybe been in a bit of poor taste, considering that, and probably just for time as well, because it does it goes on. Probably 2 or 3 minutes longer. Yeah,
I always liked, because obviously this film is a revenge film, so it's not a spoiler to say bad guys get killed in there, and I really enjoyed those scenes where each one's very different, and it all feels very original and really nicely filmed. There's a great one when David Patrick Kelly's character goes, and it's quite kind of powerful, that one, with lots of fire and stuff. But my favourite scene is the one where he kills Fun Boy, and he turns up inside his flat, and he puts his hand on the barrel of the gun, and Fun Boy's like, oh, crazy guy, ooh, crazy makeup and stuff, and then he does that whole that great Jesus Christ joke, which is Jesus Christ walks into a hotel, hands the innkeeper 3 nails, and says, "Can you put me up for the night?" I don't know. I love that scene. It's dark, and it's obviously a bit kind of some Christian humour in there, which I always like. I just think this film's it's a great fun film. I actually didn't watch it for this. I've been so busy this week. I've been working like all crazy hours. I didn't have time to actually watch it. But I was like, when we decided to do it, I was like, my God, I completely remember the whole film. I can see all those scenes and stuff. I must have watched it so many times as a teenager, but it's a great film for that. So of course we do have it. You have, I think we both have it. You're going to get it out of your pocket
whip
today.
It out.
Yeah, I have just the different version. I think I have.
You've got the UK release.
Yeah, the UK release.
This is the 2-disc US release from, I don't know, about 20 years ago, I think. And it's got some features on it, commentary, profile of James O'Barr, I think an interview with him actually, extended footage, deleted footage, interviews with the cast and stuff like that, and some production stills and designs and things like that. So, lots of different stuff on there. It is available on Blu-ray. I haven't upgraded yet because I don't think there's been any particular brilliant release. I think like the UK Blu-ray is not, the picture isn't particularly good. The US release is better, but it still could use some improvement. And
like special edition of it.
Well, I think the Blu-rays have got pretty much all the same features on. I think the UK one has an extra interview. I think it's Brandon Lee's last ever interview. But then you can find that on YouTube if you really bothered about watching it.
Yeah.
And I think Japan, it was quite recent, I think maybe last year, I can't remember, had what they claimed was a 4K restoration Blu-ray of it, but it pretty much looked the same as the US disc that was already released. So I don't think it's where they got it from, I don't know, but it doesn't appear to have been restored particularly. So it would be nice if somebody did get it and cleaned it up and gave it a nice bells and whistles edition, because I think it deserves it. I think it would be good to have some retrospective stuff on it. Obviously a lot of people, obviously Brandon Lee's no longer with us. Michael Massey passed away a few years ago. John Polito did as well.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of people, Alex Proyas is probably, it's still probably a raw subject.
I think because obviously Michael Massey, he quit acting like a year after that, didn't he?
For a year, he didn't do anything for a year, and I think I saw an interview with him, but from I think it was about 14, 15 years ago, where he, it was the first time he'd actually talked about it on camera. And he said he'd never talked about it before because it wasn't really anyone's business. He wasn't he obviously he pulled the trigger, but he wasn't responsible for the the little piece of metal or whatever it was that was in the gun. So he had to live with it, and he just, it was, he grieved like everybody else, and just, it took him a long time to get past it, and I think it made him extra safety conscious when he was on any sort of film with any sort of prop that could go wrong. So, but it happened, and there was nothing he could do to change it, and he just, he had to come to terms with it and move on.
Of course, yeah.
But and I think that maybe that's why there are no extra. No one really wants to revisit it, particularly because it is a sad story, and what else can they really say about it?
And that was The Crow. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button up there if you've enjoyed what you've watched, and don't forget to hit the bell for notifications. There's some other videos to check out over there. Come and find us on Twitter and Facebook, and join us next week for another video.